Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and welcome. We're so excited to have you join us. My name is Ashanti McGee, and I'm the lead facilitator for today's Creative West webinar with our guest speaker, Christian Gaines. On behalf of Creative West, we want to welcome you. Just before we begin, we'd like to share our Zoom norms. We'll do introductions and the session outline a little later. Marcelina, could you please share the Zoom norms and shared commitments? Okay.
Shared commitments. We value humility, learning from our mistakes, and asking questions to gain deeper understanding. We feel empowered to hold one another accountable, establish boundaries, and ask each other for help. We lean into discomfort by facing challenges and conflict with openness and grace. We stay present by listening actively, being mindful of body language, and participating in the fullest of our ability. We share from our own experiences and grow as a team through the inclusion of every individual voice. We prioritize accessibility and are mindful of our language in ensuring belonging for all. Zoom norms. Please keep your microphone mute when not speaking, the far left corner. Please rename yourself to your first and last name and your organization, if applicable. Click on Participants, hover over your name, and click the More button to change. To ask questions or to make comments, please use the raise hand function and/or write your questions in the chat at any time. Click on Reactions in the middle of your screen and choose Raise Hand, or click on Chat in the middle of your screen to write your question or comment. Live transcripts, closed captions are turned on. You can view or hide them, change the size, as well as other functions by using the up arrow on Live Transcript, which is either in the middle of your screen or behind the More button with the 3 dots on the right side of your screen. And now, back to Ashanti.
All right, thank you so much, Marcelina. And we would like to present our own Executive Director, Christian Gaines, a film arts and technology leader with experience in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. Gaines has held leadership positions at the Sundance Film Festival, the Hawaii International Film Festival, and the American Film Institute. For 5 years, he ran business development at Without a Box, a film festival submissions platform acquired by IMDb, a division of Amazon. In 2013, Gaines became executive director of Art Prize, a disruptive international arts competition held annually in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he also served as on the Michigan Arts and Culture Council and on the board of DisArt. In January 2019, Gaines joined Creative West and has stewarded the organization through significant growth and into the next chapter as Creative West. He serves as the board of directors. He serves on the board of directors of the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, also known as NASA, and recently began his service as the chair of the U.S. Regional Arts Organization Collective. Gaines is passionate about generating opportunity for artists and culture bearers, creating joyful spaces, and inspiring teams to do their best work. Okay, and I will hand it over to Christian.
Thank you so much, Ashanti. Thank you, Lena. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if I may. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you again to my colleagues, Ashanti and Lena, for the great introduction. My name is Christian Gaines. For those who'd like to know, I am an older middle-aged white man. I have a gray beard and gray hair, and I'm wearing a black fleece top with a Creative West logo on it. It is such a pleasure to be here. It is very, very exciting for me. No one ever asks me to do anything, so it's really, really exciting when I get asked to do a presentation like this. And I think I'd just like to start off by just grounding us all in a little bit of the work of Creative West. And the best way to do that is to turn to the inaugural poet laureate of the city of Albuquerque, New Mexico. His name is Hakeem Bellamy. And last year, for our 50th anniversary, Hakeem created this.
We say West is not a place. West is a destination just a little bit to the left of the heart of America. Not as much a state as we are a state of being in a place of becoming, cultivating space, one radical act of making shit at a time. Creative space making from here to all parts known and unknown, just shy of the horizon, as sure as the crow and the hummingbird flies, transcending the vanishing lines that separate us, one radical act of making us at a time. West, where the hills are still as wild as the rumors are true, where we fall in love on the usual. Consider this your warning, and you're welcome. We West, like Latin for nightfall, somewhere between today and tomorrow, somewhere between forever and forgotten. West is the way of sunsets, the cardinal direction of dreamers, abundant in the raw material of chimera come true, the way of migratory humans and ancestral homelands. Sky steady calling for the gold rush of us, and all the precious metal within. The volcanoes beneath, the oceans we breathe, half refuge, half reserve, we serve as a sanctuary for the most intrepid, most imaginative, most impossible parts of an American dream. Home of this, and the menagerie of mythical creatures we refuse to stop believing in. West, where we come true.
So that's just a little bit of the feeling of the work that we do here at Creative West. For some more specificity about this organization, supporting creativity is what we do at Creative. We do that by building equitable technology, funding, advocacy, and policy systems that generate creative capacity in the West and beyond. Essentially, we build systems that change systems. And we do it in a massive region. As a nonprofit U.S. regional arts organization with a 24-person board, we serve a broad and diverse area across the Western United States, which stretches all the way from the Arctic coast to the desert Southwest, and from the Great Plains to the Pacific Islands. So like a lot of nonprofits, we have a board, and I think a really great question to ask just to kick us all off in this discussion today, this presentation, I think it's a good question to ask, what is a nonprofit board? Well, I was born in the 1960s, and in the 1960s, this is really what boards really looked like. Um, I would like to say, before I go on any further, that I'm very aware of my own white, middle class, middle-aged, able-bodied, cisgendered identity. And for decades, centuries even, That's pretty much what occupied the American Board of Directors. The actual origin of the word is an Old Norse term, board, which actually means plank. Boarders, who would be people who would stay at other people's house, typically ate at a table made of boards. And this also leads to expressions like above board, which tends to mean honest, and as contrasted with an expression like under the table, which generally means kind of shady and dishonest. So a board of directors, you hope, will be directors around a table who are doing honest things. The concept of boards goes back into the 1600s, really all the way into the colonial era, with entities like the Massachusetts Bay Company, whose members were appointed based on their honesty and their wisdom and their expertise to manage colonial government in New England. If you think about these guys, this is George Peabody and the Board of Trustees of the Peabody Education Fund, which came along in 1867, one of the earliest charities, one of the earliest philanthropies that existed in the United States. And then you think about all the way till today, and you have someone like Ed Norton, who created a platform, a web platform called ZEC, as he says, to make board meetings infinitely more engaging and invaluable. I wonder if Ed Norton could have made the board of the Peabody Educational Fund more engaging and valuable with his platform.
I think we're going to switch interpreters. 1 minute, please.
All right, go ahead.
Thanks. So after the Massachusetts Bay Company in the 1600s, the Peabody Education Fund came along in 1867, which is often cited as the first really significant early example of what would later become a modern nonprofit organization, which is really aiming to integrate formerly enslaved people and rebuild the education system in the South. A lot of people think of the Red Cross, which was founded in 1881, as a monolithic nonprofit organization, charitable organization. Um, uh, in the civil rights movement and Vietnam War, more nonprofits started to come into being. And then it wasn't until the Tax Reform Act of 1969, where Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Service Code was formalized as a concept, something which many of you are very familiar with. The term 501c3 or even C3 tends to roll off the tongue these days when referring to a nonprofit. And the Tax Reform Act of 1969 led to a surge in nonprofit applications and a really massive growth in the sector, all the way to the point of it becoming known as the third sector, which was playing by then in the 1970s, a vital role in supporting communities, in delivering essential services, and addressing social issues. This third sector was distinguished from the public sector, the government sector, and the private sector. Today, nonprofits are generally considered to be a part of the private sector. But in the 70s, which incidentally, Creative West, then known as the Western States Arts Foundation, was founded in the 1970s, 1974 to be exact, as a part of that surge in nonprofits being created at the time. So before we go any further, I would be remiss if I didn't just give a little bit of information about how nonprofits are doing today in this moment. And quite frankly, they are under attack and targeted. you should know that 30%, over 30% of nonprofits in the United States have a federal grant or a federal contract. 2 out of 3 nonprofits in the United States have a government contract with a regional, local, or state government. Philanthropy currently is in regroup mode. I think many larger philanthropies are preparing to testify before Congress around their DEI activities. And so they're generally quiet right now as nonprofits face a lot of threats from federal funding and also so-called anti-DEI and gender ideology executive orders. The Institute for Museum and Library Services, which is a federal cultural agency, as well as the Institute of Peace, which is a nonprofit, as well as other services are being currently targeted in our current political environment. And there's lots of ongoing litigation and some really useful litigation trackers out there if you are interested in learning more about this situation, which is changing really hour by hour and day by day. It's worth knowing that, you know, this chaos, this confusion, this uncertainty is a feature rather than a bug in how things are going right now. The confusion really helps to be able to move a lot of this activity forward. So right now, as you can tell, and hopefully as I've kind of laid out here, the nonprofit world is really in a threatened place. It's been there before in one form or another. But today, as I talk today, the nonprofit world is under serious threat, which makes their nonprofit boards more essential and critical than ever before. So why have a board of directors at all? Many of you may know that if you want to achieve 501c3 status, then according to the IRS rules and many state regulations, it's a requirement to have a board of trustees of at least 3. But having to have a board of directors isn't really a great reason for having one. What is their value? What is their use? What is their purpose as it relates to the work and the mission and the vision of a nonprofit organization? So I think it's a lot of things. A well-run, thriving board of directors, board of trustees of a 501c3 nonprofit organization can offer a tremendous amount of support and value to the work of a nonprofit organization. Here are just some of the things that we think about. Accountability is very important for a nonprofit organization. It's very important for the stakeholders, for the constituents of that nonprofit to know that there's an oversight body that's making sure that the organization is operating efficiently and ethically and effectively. Advice is incredibly important for an executive director, a president, a CEO of an organization, and indeed for anyone throughout the whole organization to be able to have good advice, sometimes known as feedback, for a nonprofit organization, especially amongst people who have considerable expertise in the subject matter, is absolutely essential. Advocacy for the arts and culture function, for the health and human service function of the nonprofit in question, is incredibly important. To have a board that is enthusiastic and advocating on behalf of the work of the organization as they spread out across a community, across a region, across a country is so valuable for a nonprofit. Many nonprofits go through huge inflection points, something I'll talk about a little later. And so often nonprofits are changing, and there can be a lot of organizational change. There can be a lot of crises. There can be a lot of big opportunities. To have boards who are around to help to steward and to oversee that change is incredibly valuable. Community is incredibly important. Developing community, developing a culture, an organizational culture is something that a board can definitely help with. Keeping an organization honest and efficient and ethical is incredibly important. Expertise, having all kinds of expertise within and without all the different kinds of programs and services and activities a nonprofit might be involved in is incredibly valuable. Board members can help to fund. Some of you may think of a board of directors as primarily a give, get, or get off, as they say sometimes, as has been said, function. And funding and fundraising can be a valuable function of a board, depending on the organization itself. Hiring an executive director, keeping to the mission of the organization, networking with other potential board members, with others who might be valuable to the organization itself, whether through programming or funding or other ways that they might be able to support the organization. Offering constant oversight, which is really the activity of accountability. Planning ahead, strategic planning, adaptive planning, visioning, keeping to the organization's purpose, recruiting other potential board members, keeping the organization stable as possible by making decisions that will help to do that, would help to keep the organization sustainable and endure. Providing strategy and providing vision. So these are just some of the ways that a board of directors, a board of trustees can really help a nonprofit organization do its work and be sustainable and thrive. So today I thought I would break our talk into 6 different areas. The first is, how do you attract solid board members to a board of directors? The second is, once you have a board of directors, how do you set expectations around what is required to be on the board? How do you create community? How do you create culture within a board of trustees? How do you create a great meeting? What is a great meeting? What does that look like? How do you make board members look forward to the next meeting? What happens when the organization reaches some large-scale organizational change, a massive inflection point? How does a board member help with that? And then to set you on your way, I thought I would offer you some resources to be able to learn more and think more about how to create a great board of directors environment and experience. So first, attracting solid board members. This may sound obvious, and this might just be good advice to just get you through life. But a good board member, someone who really wants to learn more about the work, someone who really wants to get involved and make a contribution, really needs to be able to see authenticity in the work. I remember when I was at the American Film Institute and we had a small advisory committee. We really only wanted people on the advisory committee because of their names and because of their titles, and because we thought that if people could see their names and their titles, then their names and titles would give us the legitimacy that we were looking for in our film festival. We would actually say to people, please join our advisory committee. It's okay. You won't have to do anything. And that's how we went into it. And I suppose that's a kind of authenticity, but it's not really the kind of authenticity that serious board members, those who really want to make a contribution to community, really need or want to hear. They really want to know and understand what the work is, how you're approaching the work, what the real challenges are, and what the opportunities are out there, and most importantly, how they can help, how they can contribute. To that end, it's really important to be clear about the commitment of being on the board. What exactly is involved in being on the board? What will I have to do? What do you expect of me? What is the time commitment? How many board meetings will we have every year? What other commitments are there outside of board meetings? So to be really, really clear about all of that as you're recruiting board members is really important. If you're an executive director or a CEO, ask yourself, what does our board lack? What are we looking for on the board? What kind of expertise are we looking for on a board? What do we not have? And how do we go about finding that expertise? I'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but and as I mentioned earlier, what we're dealing with here is a colonial history, a colonial origin to the origins of boards, to the origins of organizations in the United States. So advancing pluralism, multiculturalism, anti-racism, and making sure that people belong is essential to the culture and the community of the organization as well as the board of directors. So, what kinds of programs can you put in place where board members can learn about anti-racism, about equity, about inclusion, and what can you do to inculcate and extend those values into the board of trustees, board of directors as well? How does the board represent your community as a nonprofit organization? Perhaps your stakeholders are involved in arts and culture and the creative economy. Perhaps they're involved in health or human services. How is your board representing that community? Are they really representing that community, or are you just finding people because you think that they have a good name, or you think that they can give you some money, or you think that they might be able to help the organization in one specific narrow way? It's important to make sure that the board, when your community, when your stakeholders, your constituents looks at your board, that they see themselves in that board of directors. It's really important to make the whole board experience worth it from beginning to end. If you're listening today and you're an executive director and you're tired of your board and you're tired of the administration that it takes, and you're barely able to put together an agenda in time for the board meeting, and attendance is low, and the conversation meanders. Um, I think it's time to really, really rethink what the board experience is and what it looks like, and how to make the most of the experience, whether it's a virtual meeting experience or an in-person meeting experience, as well as what your communication cadence is with your board of trustees throughout the year and between board meetings. Ask yourself, how willing is the board to consider new ideas? Is the board there just to maintain the status quo? Or is the board there to help you think entrepreneurially, to help you think with agility and responsiveness to the communities that you serve? Last but not least, consider board service for yourself. Consider being on a board yourself. Learn from other boards. It's amazing how much I have learned from my board service on other boards, what great ideas there are to be able to bring into your own board of director experience, your own board meeting experience, and to help lift up that experience. There's a wealth of information out there, and one of the best ways to be able to access it is by pursuing board service yourself. So the next part of the presentation that I'd like to take you through is setting expectations for a board. It is, I sort of like this little cartoon here because, it's not unusual. In fact, it's preferable if the board members come at you with hard questions. They want to know about programs. They want to know about financial sustainability. They want to know if the staff are being treated fairly. They want to know about the diversity of different kinds of funding. They want to know if board members are engaged. It's really, really important to be able to set expectations for a board. One of the great ways to be able to do this, especially in the case of new board members, is to assign a board buddy. That is someone on the board who will take a new board member under their wing and help to answer questions. Sometimes it can be incredibly intimidating being a new board member, being part of a new group. It's like being the new kid on the playground, and it can feel very alienating and intimidating. If you have a board buddy that can help you navigate all of your questions, even the ones that you're scared you think are really stupid, a board buddy can really help you through that and can help to set the expectations of the whole organization itself. The other part of this is the administration of the board meetings and the board of directors itself. Things like bylaws, things like policies, things like board meeting minutes and agendas are all really important for smooth running nonprofit board of director experiences. It's really important that the consistency and the constancy around this is maintained. It creates understanding, it creates a good flow of information, and it creates structure. And the more structure there is in these kinds of environments, there can be lots of room for fun and for creativity, but the more room there, but the more capacity there is for uh, good, solid administration, then the better, the more comfortable, the more relaxed board members can become. Having an equitable and transparent recruitment process and also term renewal processes can also be very, very important in terms of setting expectations for a board. It's very, very common for a board term to expire, a board member to leave a board, and then to simply ask other board members who might be a good fit for the board. Um, it's a really common way. It's not particularly a transparent process. It's not particularly an equitable process. And it keeps board members kind of within their comfort zones. So Creative West has a governance committee, and the governance committee develops a process with an open call for board submissions from the whole board, and then they go through an interview process and report out on how that process is going to the executive committee and to the full board every step of the way. Um, uh, Similarly, it's not unusual for boards to have regular terms. In the case of Creative West, each board member has three-year terms. The assumption can often be, the comfortable assumption can be that renewals are automatic. But actually, renewals shouldn't be automatic. Renewals are an opportunity to really reflect on and evaluate the service of that particular board member and to determine whether you want and they want to continue on to a next term. And it's a great opportunity not to just engage in automatic renewal, but to actually reflect and evaluate and develop that board member's service on the board of trustees or board of directors. Orientations and guidelines for new members are very, very important, as are descriptions, director committee descriptions. In the case of Creative West, we have an executive committee, we have a governance committee, we have an equity and inclusion committee, and we have a finance and investment committee. Each of those committees have detailed descriptions, and we also have an orientation that really helps new directors understand what goes into service on the board. The organization itself should have a strategic plan or an adaptive plan, as we do. It should have a clear mission and values that can help to guide board members and to understand what goes into their service on the board. And then a consistent information flow throughout the year. I think that this is very important. I think one of my nightmares, something that keeps me up at night, is going to a board meeting and it just being once a quarter or 3 times a year, and the board asking me about something that I haven't been keeping them up to speed on. Lots has happened in that particular topic or in that particular program or activity, and I haven't had a chance, or I haven't been able to, or I just haven't communicated with them about that. And it feels like I've been withholding information, and I haven't been withholding information. It's just that the consistent information flow process isn't there. I started something at Creative West when I first arrived in January of 2019 called the Biweekly, which is a once every 2 weeks overview of all of the program services and activities that are happening. I get each of the program leads to send along a brief paragraph update on what's going on, and then I send that out to the board and to the full staff every 2 weeks. I don't expect everyone to read it or read all of it, but the important thing is that hopefully people can scan it, and if there's something that they're particularly interested in, they can read more deeply into it. And it's an opportunity for inquiry, for questions, for comments from our extended community. So speaking of community, this is 4 board members and me. This is Makanani Salah from Hawaii. This is Karen Ewald from Hawaii. That's Taniqua Broughton in the center, our most recent chair, and Bassem Bajani, our current chair, and myself in the background. And we're at the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture, which is a gathering of the entire Pacific community, which is 28 nations and jurisdictions from across Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, who come together every 4 years to participate in arts and cultural practice. This year it was held in Honolulu, Hawaii, but the Pacific community actually calls themselves the Pacific community, even though they're in this vast area of over 10,000 islands throughout the Pacific. So when I think about community, I often think about the Pacific community and how even though those cultures and those communities are so very, very different in so many ways, they're still connected by an enormous ocean, and they call themselves a community. Taniqua Broughton, our last board chair, worked really hard with the full board of trustees, first with the executive committee and then the full board of trustees, to develop Creative West's board of trustees' own guiding principles. These principles included a foundation of respect, to engage and lead with trust, to give and to receive collaborative guidance, to give and to receive shared accountability, to share an openness to progress, to promote an empathy-forward culture, to give space to individuality, and to have a commitment to being present. In addition, she also developed, in collaboration with the executive committee and the full board, something called the three-legged stool, which provided a succinct overview of the role and responsibility of a board member of Creative West. One is oversight, frequent and transparent strategic, programmatic, and fiduciary oversight of the organization. Visioning around select key planning projects and initiatives that utilize the breadth and the depth of the expertise represented on our board of trustees. And then to build place-based community, making space for learning and reflection while spending time with each other and deepening our relationships and also our understanding of the region that we serve. So these three legs of the stool, oversight, visioning, and community, have become incredibly important to the organization. And it's not just something that we did and then we kind of like put it on in a file folder and put it on the shelf. Every time we have a board of trustees meeting and we publish a board book, which includes the agenda and all of the attachments that are going to be relevant to the meeting, we include these organizational documents as a part of the table of contents of that board book. So what makes a great board meeting? Well, first of all, connecting to the community that we serve, connecting to the community that we are, and connecting to the work that serves that community is essential. If all you're doing as a board is so-called housekeeping, then you're doing a part of the work, but you're not doing all of the work. So connecting to the community, to the people, to the projects, to the programs, to the places that make up the portfolio of the nonprofit in question is an essential part of any meeting. That being said, you want to have plenty of time for engagement and for creative thinking. Over the last year or two, the Creative West Board of Trustees has been doing some really remarkable work, making sure that they put aside 90 minutes, 2 hours, to address some prescient issue, and break up into smaller groups, discuss that issue, maybe tackle certain specific questions and then come back in and share out what their individual groups discussed, how they would approach this issue or this concern. And then they provide notes to the organization itself. Those notes are synthesized, and it really, really helps us understand some of the more complex issues that we deal with, and to develop policy, and to be able to develop initiatives around some of that advice and that feedback. There's a lot of engagement, there's a lot of creative thinking that goes into that. It's also really fun. Involve the organization in board meetings, and involve in this case, in our case, in Creative West case, our team leadership, involve them in the contents, in the agenda of the meeting itself. That's very, very important. These are leaders who are in charge of overseeing whole sections of the organization itself. They have a lot of valuable knowledge and information to bring to bear. They often give presentations. They're always at the board table. And it's essential to include the organization as much as possible in the work of the Board of Trustees. It's important to demystify what the board is doing. It's important for especially team leadership, to be able to understand what the board is doing and why that work matters to the organization as a whole. This is something that's really important to me personally, which is we have board meetings 3 times a year at Creative West. And there's time for me as the executive director, CEO, to be able to present on what I believe is important to the organization as a whole. And the world moves very fast, and challenges and opportunities within the organization moves really fast, and how the organization itself is responsive to those that we serve is constantly changing. And so this is an opportunity for me to say what I really need to say in that moment in time, and to frame it in a way that will hopefully be memorable. And this is really important because understanding how to frame something and understanding how to synthesize something and to be able to really bring out what is essential in that moment in time is something that you develop over time. And presenting to a board of directors has really allowed me to be able to ask myself, what do I really want to say? What is really important? And how am I going to frame that particular topic? And when you have that opportunity 3 times a year, it's an incredible opportunity as a leader to be able to synthesize your thoughts and present it in a way that hopefully is cogent and thoughtful. Always stay organized and on task as much as possible. When you put together an agenda for a 4 or a 5 hour meeting, it's not surprising to drift away from certain specific start times in the agenda. But it's amazing how you'll be 25 minutes behind and then 25 minutes ahead. But stay organized and on task. Board members are usually busy people. They're usually busy professionals. They have a lot going on. They're volunteering their time. And so they want to stay on point in general, and do not want to meander too much from the topic at hand. If you can move around as a board of directors of a nonprofit organization, there's some time and logistics and bandwidth and expense to that. But being connected to the locality that you are, to the community where you are, the place where you are, where you can learn about that locality, you can socialize within it, you can understand about some of the other people, places, organizations within that locality, is a really thought-provoking, fun, reflective way for a board to understand more about hopefully those that they serve, as well as to get to know each other better. Getting centered is really important as well. Someone told me a story about a professor, a college professor, who would play the same song every single time the students were coming into the class. He would play the same exact 3-minute song while people were coming in, so that whether you were coming from another class, whether you had overslept and you were rushing to class, or you were coming from a sporting event, whatever you were doing, from a phone call that had you thinking about something, the idea was to get everyone on the same page and centered and focused on the meeting at hand. So sometimes that can be a land acknowledgement. Sometimes that can be just an acknowledgement of the place where you are, of the conditions that you find yourself in as you arrive. They could be social conditions, political conditions, conditions that are material in some way, environmental conditions that are material to the work of the nonprofit. Getting centered so that everyone has a sense that they're there, that they're a part of something that is important, that is meaningful, and that they are about to drive change in this meeting is, I think, a very, very important thing for any nonprofit board to do. So, what happens if there's a big inflection point? What happens if there's a big uh, organizational change? This social psychologist, Kurt Newell, has this theory of change about how organizations freeze, how organizations are frozen, and how they become fluid, and then how they refreeze into a new organization. Um, this is something that I think about a lot, and I think about how, as a nonprofit CEO, and as if you're leading any a meaningful social change organization, you're dealing constantly in this environment of ambiguity. And by extension, your board is as well. And the ambiguity on the one end is being tired, and there being lots of order and lots of process. But on the other end of that ambiguity spectrum is potentially chaos, which doesn't sound great. However, somewhere in that chaos can be intense and wonderful creativity. And so, where is the balance between this order and this creativity? A little bit more about Kurt Newell here. He would talk about how an organization would be frozen, and there would be a lot of order. You would know everything. You would fear change, and the organization was generally tired. Um, there would be some big inflection point that would create fluidity within the organization. Lots of questions being asked, with lots of turbulence and tension around those questions. But all of a sudden, people were talking about the things that they weren't supposed to be talking about. Um, there was a lot of creativity that came out of that. Again, a lot of ambiguity. Those questions weren't easily answered. And then eventually the organization would reform or adapt into a refrozen organization that would take all of those lessons from that period of fluidity. And there would be more consensus and more clarity in this new world, but also more burnout as well. Lots of casualty and fallout from that. An exhausting sounding process. Um, it was in that time of change, our 50th anniversary, that Creative West itself, formerly the Western States Arts Federation, sought to rebrand. So we rebranded from WestAF, the Western States Arts Federation, to Creative West. We did all kinds of work in creating the new Creative West brand. We renamed ourselves. We did lots of new messaging work. And we came up with this great new brand, which we've been using now for a little less than a year. The board was absolutely instrumental in that process, that inflection point change. A 50-year-old organization deciding to change its not just its logo, but its name, how it talked about itself, and what kind of messaging it got out there into the world. And the board offered this forum for incredible deep thinking. They offered a willingness to like have our mind changed, a constant culture of curiosity. There was permission from the board to move as slowly as we needed to move. There was no urgency in this process. We went back over things if we needed to, rinse and repeat, as a former board member would say. And slowly over time, we were able to build consensus. And the board served as trusted and knowledgeable and supportive instigators and inquisitors and facilitators of this project. And again, more than a logo was produced. We had a revitalized identity. We had new images, we had new words, we had new ideas. That whole process, which took a little less than 2 years for the organization, would have been quite chaotic if it hadn't been for the Board of Trustees. And indeed, there was a lot of ambiguity in the process, a lot of questions without any really easy answers, a lot of meetings where we left sometimes feeling more confused than we had been going into the meeting. But this was all part of that ambiguity process. And the board offered this forum, this safe space for us to be able to go through that process in a way that yielded a really, really, really successful outcome. So in conclusion, I just wanted to offer some resources real quick. There's some books out there. This is actually more of a white paper. If you're curious about the history of just nonprofit boards in the United States, BoardSource has this great BoardSource, by the way. If you're going to Google anything, they're a wonderful resource on the internet that has just, if you're building a new board, if you're wondering about how boards are put together, what the so-called right way of doing it is, so that you can do it differently if you want, so that you can disrupt that. This is a great place to start, and it's a great place to sort of understand the history of nonprofit boards in the United States. BoardSource has something else called the Nonprofit Board Answer Book. Again, it's the sort of, this is the right way of doing something. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way for you, but if you're curious how things have generally been done, there's a lot of great answers in a book like this. Things get far, far more interesting in a book like The Culturally Conscious Board. This is a book that's really meant for board members, and it really helps to ground board members in how they can be the most helpful, the most useful board member they can possibly be. And I think it's a wonderful book. The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, How We Meet and Why It Matters. I read this book right after the pandemic, when people were slowly coming back and meeting together in groups. And people were kind of socially very uncertain. And we had sort of forgotten what the purpose was around being together in a group and why being together in person mattered. And in fact, even before the pandemic, we had sort of forgotten that. Board meetings were kind of rote. And even other big events like birthdays or weddings or other big events where people were just kind of going through the motions of what that was. A book like this helps you to rethink what you want to get out of meeting together in person. And I can't recommend this book highly enough. It's really, really just a wonderful read. Some web sources. Nonprofit AF by Vu Le is absolutely gospel reading by a lot of people. We absolutely love this. It is funny, it is irreverent. He talks a lot about just the culture of nonprofits, the culture of fundraising, of foundations and philanthropy, and everything that goes into the nonprofit world. He has this hilarious thing where he says, this is just a little excerpt. 8 years ago, I remember being excited that I finally got this really great community leader to join my nonprofit's board. I will call him Min. I was excited to have Min and his skills, especially around the logistics of running a board, which at the time was full of well-meaning but inexperienced leaders. Maybe Min would get the board into shape. And he seemed like a nice guy who truly wanted to help the community. Min turned out to be a nightmare. Among his many offenses, he butted into operations, including insisting on designing the flyer for the annual gala. When it turned out horrible and the staff gave him feedback, this looks like we're throwing a Halloween party, they said. He was offended and demanded staff meeting minutes for some mysterious reason. Then he tried to start a mutiny to remove the board chair, which then caused a rumor that I was trying to remove the board chair, and then the board chair tried to get me fired as the ED. Even now, 18 years later, I sometimes wake up in a cold sweat. Min's cursed words ringing in my ears. I have graphic design experience. So that's just a little bit taste of what you can accept from Vu Le's Nonprofit AF. It's wonderful. Joan Gary, Nonprofits Are Messy, is an incredible. She has a kind of a membership structure, but there's a ton of free content on this. And she has podcasts, she has loads of essays, she has a weekly email that comes in your inbox. If you are running a nonprofit and are dealing with all kinds of things that nonprofits deal with, then this is just a really, really great place to go and get some inspiration. It's great for reference. Um, Tema Okun's Divorcing White Supremacy Culture has been incredibly important to me. This goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, that primarily what you're dealing with in the history of boards is this white dominant culture where there's a lot of precepts, whether it is this idea of instilling urgency in something, whether it's the worship of the written word, whether it's inculcating fear, or white people having a right to comfort and a fear of conflict. All of these things are part of this white supremacy, this white dominant culture that Tema does an incredible job of deconstructing. For me, it was it's always been a really, really important reminder of what we're doing here and what we're working to disrupt. Similarly, this continuum on becoming an anti-bias multicultural institution is a great worksheet for any board that wants to make sure that they're doing effective and engaging DEI work. This basically shows what an essentially entirely monocultural institution looks like, and the steps that it goes through to become first multicultural, then anti-biased, and then an anti-biased multicultural institution. And it's just a really kind of a helpful reference for an executive director, for a full board, for a board chair to be able to kind of understand where a board is in its anti-racism social justice journey. And hopefully some of those things will help you as you head down the road with your nonprofit organization. And I just wanted to leave you with this incredible picture of all of the staff and all of the board of Creative West at our 50th anniversary party, all together. Um, it was a really, really wonderful time. And I hope that many of you with your nonprofit organizations, if you're thinking of starting a nonprofit organization, if you're currently running one, if you're looking for some inspiration to create a more enriching, a more fulfilling, a more nourishing nonprofit board experience, I hope that this has been giving you some ideas. I hope that it's been really, really helpful. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening in today.
Thank you so much, Christian, for that wonderful presentation. I am going to ask if anybody would like to ask any questions, if people have maybe comments or questions regarding some of the content that Christian covered, and we'll leave some minutes for that.
I see a hand raised, Graham Cole.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Christian. We really appreciate the information. I have a question about challenges that you bring in front of the board. How do you think about what challenges to bring to the board, and how do you think about what challenges not to bring to the board?
That's a great question, Graham. The first thing that is really important to me is transparency. I want to make sure that I get challenges, whether they're financial challenges, whether they're any kind of a challenge that might present some sort of a threat to the smooth running of the organization. I want to make sure that I get those in front of the board as quickly as possible. I would much sooner do it on the front end than on the trailing back end. So that's just me. I would like to rip off that Band-Aid as soon as I possibly can. Typically, I will start off by talking to the chair. I have a meeting with the chair every week, every Monday. And then that will usually move to the executive committee. The executive committee meets virtually every month. And then during the board meeting process as well. And then depending on what their feedback is, what their advice is, we'll move it on to the full board. And that can be either in terms of an in-person presentation at a board meeting, if it can wait until then. But if not, then it can be in the context of an email or something like that. In terms of what I do and what I don't bring to the board, I would rather be safe than sorry, in general. And, I feel like if there are, for example, human resource challenges, I'll tend not to bring those kinds of things to the board because the board feels that the organization itself, myself as the CEO, the other lead managers within the organization have a lot of agency over that. And unless there's an HR matter, which is especially serious, then they feel that that is something that can be held within the purview of the organization itself. But if there's anything that I would rather them know about before they find out about it themselves, I will definitely try and be the first one with the knowledge and the information.
Thank you very much.
We have a question in the chat. Can you chat about the difference between an advisory board and board of directors?
Yes. Yeah, I did mention the advisory committee that I was a part of, or that I oversaw at the American Film Institute. At the American Film Institute, they had a big deal board of directors. They do have a big deal board of directors. And we were a big program of the American Film Institute, which was a film festival called AFI Fest. So we weren't allowed to have our own board of directors because we were a program of a larger nonprofit, but we were allowed to have an advisory committee. And I would probably say the biggest difference between an advisory committee and a board of directors probably begins with being a legal one. You know, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned towards the beginning of the presentation, part of your to be a 501c3, you need to have a board of at least 3 board members. I think that there are some different rules state by state, but I think federal rules require at least a board of directors if you're going to be a 501c3 of at least 3 people. If you're not a 501c3, and it's not the path for everyone, that's for sure. But you still want to have that kind of advice oversight function. An advisory committee is a great way to go. You know, if you're a collective, if you're a collaborative, if you're, like I said, you know, a non-501c3 entity, that still wants to have some oversight, some advice, some support structure, then I think an advisory committee is a great way to go. That's sort of pretty much what I have to say about that.
Anika,
Hi there. I just wanted to hop in. I don't know when we're going to end, but I just want to just thank Christian for agreeing to do this. As you mentioned, it's the first time we've asked you to do something like this. I don't think it will be the last. It's great turnout. And I'm really happy to see so many of our grantees, alumni from our various programs, and some board members here, which I think is also in support and is a testament for your leadership and how the board members value being a trustee member. So I just want to encourage folks in the audience too, if you have questions to ask, but also as you give survey feedback, which Ashanti I know will be sending out a session feedback form to along these lines of governance and so on, to share with us what other types of related topics you would be interested in learning more about. So thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Anika. That's Anika Tanay, everyone. That's our Director of Grants, Awards, and Programs at Creative West.
we have another in the chat. The board of which I'm a president wants to have a board with a range of ethnicities. However, our board is task oriented, and with all of the intermarriage, especially in Hawaii, it is difficult to know people's ethnicities. Any suggestions?
I do think that a range of diverse perspectives on a board is absolutely essential. I also think that being able to meet people in person before they actually are on a board is also just a really wonderful way to be able to get to know someone better, whether you're actually in real life in person or virtually in person, but definitely meeting people and getting to know them better and being able to better understand why they want to be on the board. So I think that that's important. We do regular demographic surveys where we cover a range of identity questions, lots of um, oversight. Organizations like ProPublica and Charity Navigator and others ask for that, and it offers like much greater transparency into your board and the makeup of the board. And so I'm generally an advocate of just as much transparency as any board as any organization can muster. So that's what I have to say about that. I think a range of identities on a board is essential. It doesn't matter what the board is engaged in, whether it's arts and culture or health and human services. To have a board that represents the planet that we live on is just, I think, really, really essential. and certainly race and ethnicity, as well as other identity factors, really are a part of that. So, I would encourage you as a board president to really think about that deeply, think about that as much as possible. Um, we're in a very strange world right now where DEI seems to have become this loaded term. And I would really advise and encourage you to shut out that noise and to make sure that your oversight body, your board, is as representative as possible of the communities it seeks to serve.
Another from the chat. How often do you recommend to have board turnaround? How do you combat apathy from board members?
That's a great question, actually. It's really, I mean, it's hard to combat apathy in general. So and I do think that that creating a great board experience really makes it worth it and is a really great way to be able to combat apathy. I think that having a regular board terms, ours happen to be, as I mentioned earlier, 3 terms of 3 years, but they don't have to be 3 terms of 3 years. But I do think that board terms and term limits are really important to continue to further the vitality and the enthusiasm of a board. It's been hard to see some board members leave the Creative West board because you become very uh, reliant on their advice and very reliant on their expertise and on what they bring to the conversation. And when they're gone, they're gone. And that is really sad. And one of the things that you notice is that the makeup of the board, the complexion of the board, just slowly morphs and adjusts over time as board members come and go. And that is really, I think, an occupational hazard of a good board. And I think it's, even though there's some sort of trailing heartache associated with seeing people go, I think that it is exciting to see the board constantly morphing and constantly changing. For that reason, I do think I do think that a changing board, an evolving board, a board that's perhaps evolving to be as responsive as it can possibly be to the times, to the issues of that nonprofit. I think that that's a really, really healthy thing. In terms of combating apathy, I think that having constant, honest conversations about what's working and what's not working in a board environment is really, really important. Those are conversations that you can have with your board chair, with your executive committee, with the whole board if you want to. Um, and um, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from the board who've said we really like this part of the board meeting, but this part of the board meeting we could really do without. Or this part of the board meeting doesn't need to be 20 minutes long. It's okay if it's 5 minutes long. Or let's create something so that we can create some time that's more fun, that's more dynamic, that's still serving the organization, but is doing it in a way that is more energetic, more dynamic, so that we're excited about the work and so that we want to come back. And I think apathy starts to set in um, when there's a lot of sort of realized expectations around how a board meeting is going to go, or what kind of communication one can expect, or how just the sort of housekeeping plodding along of a board. That part of it can become quite monotonous, and you want to be able to disrupt that as much as you possibly can. Um, if you want some ideas about how to keep board meetings kind of interesting and exciting, and how you can really get out of a board meeting what you want, I would really recommend The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. who has a great section on what makes a dynamic board meeting. And certainly, if you're the CEO of an organization and you want to make sure that your board is as effective as possible, what steps can you do to make sure that that's the case? I often hear a lot of CEOs of nonprofits complaining about their board, complaining just like what you were saying, that it's kind of apathetic, or they don't really do anything, or they're not really raising any money, or they're not really, and it's sort of easy to kind of like end that there. But it's they're your board, and there's a way to be able to create something which is uh, engaging and leaning in and joyful, and not kind of apathetic and turgid, and not meeting the needs of the organization. And there's definitely there's methods, there's techniques that you can deploy to help to create a more energetic and dynamic board environment, whether it's during a board meeting or the rest of the year as well. And if someone is really serious about that, there's a lot of different kinds of ways to be able to approach it. It will take a while. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. Declaring that that one wants to create a more proactive, a more productive, more generative, more joyful board culture is definitely a good place to start. Thinking about what guiding principles might mean, having the board to really engage around their own guiding principles, I think is really important. We did a session last year with the board, and this topic line was simply, "What aren't we talking about?" Which was intense. It was kind of an intense conversation, but it was really, really productive, and I think really, really worthwhile. And it really it really helped me to understand, and I think board members to understand, that we were kind of in charge of our own destiny. And it's easy for us to sort of drift into um, uh, inactivity, to drift into boredom. And we really wanted to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think that there's some techniques, some of them are sort of operative, like term limits, turnover, new energy, new interest, a new board chair who has different ideas, new officers, committees that are being structured in different ways, or that are learning from the previous committee. All of a sudden, the board evolves, and the board starts to develop its own culture and its own way of doing things that are self-propelling. And that's really, really exciting to see. But if you feel that your board is apathetic, then I would make it a priority to do what you can to pull it out.
We have time for just two more questions. So the last two in the chat are going to be the last two, and we understand we want to be respectful of time. So if you do have to go, we will be sending a recording out of this session to everyone who signed up within the week. The first of the last question is, are you saying term limits for regular board members in addition to officers? What about if you're in a small community? And then they added to their question, do you have resources for smaller boards and organizations? It seems like a lot of your suggestions have been for larger boards / organizations.
Yes, I have I've also had boards with much smaller nonprofits as well. And you're right, the Creative West is a fairly large nonprofit. And the first part of the question was term limits. So yes, there's term limits both for committees as well as for board members themselves. Um, if you're not sure about term limits, definitely that's something that you can definitely figure out with a governance committee of the board. Our committees are one-year committees. So there's a lot of change with the committees. And we like to have every board member involved in a committee. So that's something that I think is important. So term limits for committees are different than term limits for the board members themselves. To get to I think the most important part of your question, which is kind of like you've been talking a lot about a big board, but about small organizations and small boards. I really feel that culture and community is something that is something that can be understood and learned and propagated across organizations and boards of all sizes. And that if you want to have a board and you want to have an oversight body, no matter if you're a very small organization or a large one, and as an organization you determine that that is something that you need and that you want to do, then you should prioritize the administration of that board. It's really hard because bandwidth is limited, resources are limited. And if you're a very, very small organization, to sort of manage a meeting once a month or every other month, and to have people come together and to put together an agenda and to type up minutes and to do all of these things can be very, very time consuming and very onerous, especially for a small organization. And I really, really get that. That being said, if something is really worth doing, it's worth doing to the fullest extent. And I tend to notice that the more you put into something, hopefully the more you get out of it as well. And creating an oversight body that is helpful, that is constructive, that offers really valuable advice, that potentially raises funds, that creates a sense of confidence in the oversight of the organization. I think that's something that's really worth it for an organization, no matter the size.
Alrighty, and we have one last question. Building off of Pamela's question and creating a board experience, I am part of a small arts collective who's thinking of becoming a nonprofit. We are a young group and exist as non-hierarchical structure. This is great in some ways, but calling back to the Kurt-Newell diagram and ambiguity, how can we prepare ourselves for putting together a more structured org without hitting ourselves with the shockwave of structure, committee admin work, etc.?
Wow, there's a lot in that question. How about this? My email is on the screen here. If you'd be in touch with me, I'd be happy to meet with you and to kind of help to unpack some of the things that you talked about. Probably more than we can kind of unpack in the minute or two that we have left. But I'd be happy to talk to you about any aspect of that if you think it would be helpful, but no pressure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Back to Ashanti.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us up to this point. I am going to provide our feedback survey. And we also would like to welcome you to our other webinars that we'll be having. This is our calendar. And so the next one is actually coming up quite fast. It's grant writing with our grant specialist, Sierra Scott. And so I will also have those in that link in the chat as well. So I want to thank you all for joining us. And please make sure to just continue following us, and we look forward to seeing you very soon.